Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet Preview Series presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTGBasketball. Also hit that subscribe button. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me tonight, a full house. Kory Waldron, Jesse Corwin, Matt Chin, ready to talk Celtics. What's up, guys?
Gentlemen, how we doing? Good.
Let's get right into it.
Big threes are no longer here. We got a big four.
Yes.
Yeah.
There we go.
We're all about the super teams over here, but like you said, let's get right into it. Number 5, first team in our top 5, Boston Celtics. You know, before we talk about the ranking, let's talk about this team from last season. First seed in the Eastern Conference, all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Pretty successful year. What were your thoughts on last season?
I'll go first. I thought they had a great season. They really maximized their talent. I thought on paper, talent-wise, they were probably more of like the 4th or 5th best team in the East, but just the way that they fit into Brad Stevens' scheme, into their roles respectively, I was really impressed with everything that they were able to put together, both on the offensive and defensive end last year. I think from a team building perspective, where they've come since they blew it up in 2012, you couldn't have asked for much more in terms of a regrowth from that period on the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, Matt, I agree. I mean, obviously, last year, you know, we watched games every night, and I mean, every night was super exciting. And if you look at it from kind of a business model, I mean, they took their assets and they squeezed them dry, like they maximized their assets and they moved kind of in the direction that they obviously wanted to. You know, the big question last year was like, do they want to pay Isaiah Thomas moving forward? What's going to happen with that? And so I think that was the big question for me that was answered this summer. And so last season, a ton of fun and, you know, looking for big things ahead.
Yeah, I mean, last year they were one of those basketball teams that was so dependent on ball movement, and they played good basketball. You know, Isaiah Thomas obviously was a superstar for them, averaging right around 30 points per game, and you know, Mr. Fourth Quarter, all the clutch, big time fourth quarters had down the stretch, them being the 1 seed. I mean, this team all year though, like you said, Matt, you know, on paper they're probably not like the 3rd or 4th best team in the East. But because they play such unselfish basketball, you know, they were the best team in the East last year.
So you guys mentioned they maximized talent. Were you surprised they landed the first seed and got 53 wins? Do you thought this was kind of like a step ahead in what phase they were in the rebuild process?
I thought it was a step ahead. Before the season, I thought maybe the 3rd or 4th seed would have been their ceiling. I think they got a lot of help from Cleveland down the stretch because Cleveland obviously was not that interested in the top seed. They were more interested in saving themselves for the playoffs. And Boston was the kind of team that put it all out on the floor every single night. I think what Celtics fans are really satisfied with is the level of effort and energy that they brought on a night-to-night basis. So they deserve the first seed. I don't know if you top to bottom, you would have said they were the best team throughout the regular season. But I was certainly surprised with top to bottom whether that they could get the top seed going into the playoffs.
Yeah, Matt, I think that's pretty much spot on, man. Last year, before the season, I think I had them pegged at a generous 3 spot. I kind of thought the Wizards would sneak in there. They've been a bit disappointing, but yeah, so that's where I had them pegged before the season, but kind of, you know, as that season went on, you know, I think you pretty much hit it on the head that they come to play every night. And I think that may be like the biggest fear for Boston fans, as excited as everyone is like, did we lose that kind of, you know, that 5th element, that grit factor? And I think that's something that kind of has some people worried.
I mean, definitely, I don't think any. I mean, personally, I didn't think they were going to be a 1 seed, but we've seen this from Cleveland in the past. You know, LeBron takes some games off. You know, they don't really catch a stride. They don't really catch their stride till late in the season. We saw the Hawks get a 1 seed over them a couple of years ago. You know, the 1 seed has never really been important to the Cavs. You know, I'm not shocked that they didn't get it, but I am shocked that the Celtics were able to take that 1 seed.
What do you think was the biggest highlight of the Celtics season last year?
Well, outside of Isaiah Thomas's growth, I think that's number one. We all know about that, but kind of on the back of the radar, just the emergence of Brad Stevens. I think he's taken this team from his first year and gone along with the rebuild, and he's become a premier coach in the NBA. I think around the NBA, players are recognizing how good of a coach, in-game manager Brad Stevens is. His offensive schemes, the way he plays a more modernized system with a lot of ball movement, a lot of player movement, putting positionless basketball out on the floor, players that can make different kinds of plays, facilitate from different areas of the floor. So I think one of the biggest highlights was really the emergence of Brad Stevens and how he was able to handle his team and really maximize all the talent and hide some of the negative sides of some of the players that he had and be able to hide them within his scheme. So for me, one of the bigger highlights that goes unseen is Brad Stevens.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and he's certainly cementing his place and getting a lot of respect. And in certain ways, I think that does turn Boston into more of a destination than it has been. Not just the roster, but I think when you're going to work with a coach that's going to make you better. I think that's an attractive feature. So for me last season, it was the run Isaiah Thomas had, where he had a series of 50-point games. There was late in the season and then into the playoffs. There's not often you legitimately mouth open, yell at your TV or your tablet or whatever you're watching. That was just pure sport, just a capsule in time that you'll probably never see that again. And also, beating the Wizards in that game 7. That was a hell of a series.
Yeah, it was. Brad Stevens for sure, Matt. You make a great point. He really emerged, I think, as one of the best coaches in the league, especially with what he's already done in the Celtics in his short time there. And like you mentioned, Jesse, because of how well he's done, he was a big factor in them getting Hayward, who we'll talk about later on the podcast. Without Stevens, they probably don't get Hayward. My go-to guy is going to be Al Horford. Coming off that huge contract, I know a lot of people ridicule Al Horford. I'm not sure if you guys are huge fans of Al Horford, but me being a Gators fan, I've always liked Al Horford. And, he may not be a second or even a third option offensively for a team, but he does just the little things. He's a decent rebounder. He's very good at moving the ball. He's a little bit flat-footed at times on defense, but he can do a little bit. And I just like what he was able to bring as a veteran leadership to this Celtics team last year.
Isaiah Thomas, like you said, Jesse, just the fact that you're going to see somebody who's under 5'10", average almost 30 points a game, have the stretches he did and carry a team, when he's such at a disadvantage, from a physical standpoint, probably from an athletic standpoint as well, that's something that you won't forget.
Kory, I just want to kind of harken back to what you were saying about Al Horford. I think he gets a lot of flack within the Boston media because with the contract that he has, people see the number that's attached to his name and say, well, why doesn't this guy average 25 points a game? He's on a max deal. Why doesn't he grab 10 rebounds a game? But I think the strength for Al Horford and where his true value comes in is in his intangibles. Being able to stretch the floor, being able to facilitate from the top of the key, opening up the driving lane for Isaiah Thomas, bringing the opposing bigs out from underneath the basket so there isn't a rim protector there. His defensive versatility, his ability to stretch it out and shoot threes, pick and roll, pick and pop. I think he's one of the best dribble handoff bigs that we have in the NBA. So Horford isn't that prototypical max level player that you're looking for, an isolation, heat check type of scorer. But as a third or fourth player on a team, I think he's a great facilitator. He's not someone that demands a huge volume of shots. So as they're currently constructed going to this season, I love where Al Horford's role is going to be on this team.
Yeah, the fit he has with this team, especially with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But biggest disappointment for the Celtics last year, what did you not like?
There really wasn't a lot to not like. I would say toward the end of the season, not being able to have Isaiah Thomas healthy, toward the end of the Wizards series and into the Cavs series, he was dealing with that hip injury the entire time. I would have loved to see what they could have done against Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals with a healthy Isaiah Thomas. So for me, that's the biggest disappointment overall.
Yeah, I think it's got to be the Thomas injury. Clearly that was a big deal finishing up. For me, it was always Marcus Smart's conditioning, which was frustrating to me, which is, why I think he wasn't as good of a shooter or, quite as even good as he could be, defensively on the perimeter because of that. But, I'm sure we'll get into that a bit later.
Yeah, actually, I'm rolling with you too, Jesse. Marcus Smart, for as good a defender he is, as the huge steals he had at the end of games, and as well as he played, conditioning wise and offensively, I would like to see a guy who's, in his third year in the NBA, able to shoot above 40%. He just can't get above 36%. It feels like he just hovers there. So for me, Marcus Smart would probably be my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, and they're expecting a lot of Smart this year, so we'll see what happens with that. But I think, like you said, Matt, the way the season ends, anytime when you lose your best player going to the conference finals, that just sucks, and the way they got beat, we all kind of knew that they didn't have a chance without IT. So to just end it that way just is not what you want to see from as a fan's perspective. But we mentioned it before, this ranking, Celtics first team in our top 5, with a number 5 ranking, and to give our writers, a little bit of a pass, the Celtics, the power rankings were voted on before the Kyrie Irving trade, I believe. So, they had them at 5 before that. Do you think this is too high, too low with the current team?
I think it's just right. This team is super young. A lot of people have high expectations for this team this year, but I actually think the Kyrie Irving deal, some of the other offseason moves they made were for them to build for the future, 2019 and beyond. They see what's happening in Cleveland with LeBron's contract. They see what's happening in Golden State with 2 more years of Klay Thompson before they have to make some tough decisions. So I think they're in the right place rankings-wise amongst our writers.
Yeah, I don't think you can complain too much either way. I don't put a ton of stock in preseason rankings, but I mean, so who are we talking in front of them? We got Warriors, Cavs, Spurs, Houston.
Yep.
I'm assuming is that?
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, I can't argue with that. Like, I think the Celtics are going to be a better team than Houston, personally. But I mean, whatever, one spot here or there. I won't complain too much.
I think 5 is fair. I think because of the 3 powerhouses out west and because of the Cavs in the East, this is just about right for the Celtics.
Yeah, I think this is probably fair. Maybe, early on in the season, they could have some chemistry issues, but by the time the season ends, they'll definitely be a top 5 team. And I think, like you kind of mentioned, Matt, losing some of the pieces they lost could hurt them maybe this year, but moving forward, they're set up in such a great position. It's rare that you can see a team like this that could possibly end up in the finals and still get better next season without even making another offseason move.
Yep.
So, and you can thank my Brooklyn Nets for that. But let's talk
the whole track of the Celtics. That's the thing that just makes it so enticing story wise. Is it's something that we've almost never seen, the kind of build of young talent, and you bring in this coach and infuse that with these crazy draft picks. It's wild to watch.
And they're going to be good for so long.
Right.
Yeah, and we just haven't seen a team that's in this kind of position where they're competing now for a Eastern Conference championship, but they also have young developmental players. Almost their entire bench are in their first 3 years in the NBA. So they're really building for the future and building for the present.
And the young pieces they have aren't just, late first round picks. We're talking about some guys that were top 5 picks in a Tatum and a Brown. So talking about Jason Tatum, let's talk additions in the draft. Obviously, they had the number 1 pick from the Nets. They made a trade with Philly, picked up a future pick that could end up being the Lakers or the Kings, and they ended up with the number 3 pick in this draft. Got Jason Tatum. Some people had him as the most NBA-ready rookie in the draft. What were your thoughts on him, and what were your thoughts about the pick?
I was happy with the pick. I think Danny Ainge has earned the reputation the last couple of years of drafting defensive specialists, guys who are very switchable, athletic, long, but with completely broken jump shots. Your Jaylen Browns, your Marcus Smarts, your Terry Roziers, Avery Bradley. I think those guys really have defined a mold for Celtics draft picks in the first round. And was Josh Jackson, who fits that mold completely. So I'm really glad that they got Jason Tatum, someone who has a polished isolation offensive game, someone who you can give the ball to in the last 4 or 5 seconds of the shot clock and get him to create his own shot. He's obviously has a long way to go. He has all of the makings to be a great player, but he's still really skinny. He needs a little bit of work on the defensive end. You wonder if he can play in a fast-paced motion system because he was a little bit of a ball stopper at Duke. But overall, I love the variety that he brings to the bench. I think in a couple of years, Jason Tatum will be a really special player.
Yeah, Matt, I think that's really well said. One thing about Tatum, I think the ball stopper point is well received, but he makes quick decisions with the ball as well. He's not one of these guys who's going to back down, take 2, 3, 4 dribbles before he makes a spin move or whatever. So I think it will work with him. And I was really excited when they took him in the draft, just as a person. And I know this is kind of cliche, but I think in basketball it does matter a lot. He's just a really good guy and really smooth. I likened him to like an old young like Grant Hill back in the day. But a very smooth offensive game, like you said. And I think he is underrated defensively. I just think he never really had to put a lot of stock in that. But, in camp with Brad Stevens, that's not going to be the case. So I'm really excited for that pick.
Yeah, I think defensively in college, not everyone plays as hard defensively. And like you said, Jesse, playing under Brad Stevens, he's not really going to be able to take plays off or do any of that kind of shenanigans in the pros. Like you guys both said, offensively, obviously he's going to be 19 years old, so the impact he can have on an NBA court is going to be minimal, I think, at least this first year. I don't know how many big-time minutes he can seriously play with his size, but, we saw him dominate in Summer League. I haven't seen him play in preseason yet. But, this kid, obviously, they're going to need him to come off the bench, losing most of their players from last year. His fadeaway is sick nasty.
Yeah, it is.
Limit for Tatum.
Is this the guy that you wanted the Celtics to take in the draft regardless? If they had the number one overall pick, if you had the pick from anybody in the draft, who would you have went with?
I thought Fultz was the most natural, ready player. I thought he had the highest ceiling. I saw his game translating to the NBA. The most out of those top 5 players. But at number 3, I was really happy that they took Tatum over Josh Jackson, and being able to store another asset for the future, stockpiling more in case they want to make another move at some point. It's not a bad deal. I don't think the Lakers are going to be great this year, despite what Laker fans might think about Kyle Kuzma and Lonzo Ball. I don't think they're going to be great this year in a tough Western Conference. So overall, I'm fine with what Danny Ainge did.
Kory, what do you got?
For me, I personally wanted them to get Fultz. I kind of thought, I was thinking big picture. I didn't want to give Isaiah Thomas max money. So I thought if you got a young guy like Fultz, he can play this rookie year out, and then Isaiah Thomas you can just let him go or trade him at the deadline. Obviously, hindsight 2020, they got Kyrie Irving, they got Jason Tatum, everything worked out. Personally, I would have went with Fultz only because I didn't have faith in Isaiah Thomas long term.
Yeah, it's like so many permutations ago. It's hard to even fathom. So at that point, the big story was so we got the first pick, and everyone's like, oh, okay, Markelle Fultz. And at that point, you're very excited. You're obviously not thinking of Jason Tatum. And of course, at the time, Danny Ainge said that Tatum was his guy all along. It's still hard to believe, but we'll see. He doesn't have the greatest draft record to DJ Chin's point over there. So everyone doesn't have a ton of trust there. So when he traded down to 3, there was more than mild backlash over that from the locals. But once we had the 3rd pick, I wanted no part of Josh Jackson. So I was really happy with Tatum. I like him a lot.
And, you mentioned, Danny Ainge not necessarily having the best draft history. He almost protected himself making this trade because not only did he get a high pick in number 3, a nice trade asset, but he picked up another high pick, which is another trade asset. So he kind of split one really good asset into 2 other really good assets. So it works out perfectly for the Celtics once again.
I think he's just scared. I think draft picks are like his binky, He's like, I'm running low. He's like a fiend. He's like, I need more. So yeah, but to your point, I think, it certainly looks like a pretty shrewd move at this point, but we'll see.
Exactly. And they also had some more picks in the draft. No more first-round picks, but second-round picks. They got a Semi Ojeleye, early second round. This guy is huge. He looked like he could maybe play in the NFL. He's a tough dude. What are your thoughts on him? Do you see him possibly getting any minutes, or he's going to spend most of the time in the G League?
I love Semi Ojeleye. I loved the pick. I think he fits the modern 3-and-D mold really well. Like you said, Nick, he is absolutely jacked. The guy has huge arms. He looks like he should be playing defensive line for the Patriots. And they used him all over the place in the first preseason game, at the 2, at the 3, at the 4. So they're mixing it up. I think he has he's still very raw offensively. Can't really put it on the deck too much, but a good 3-point shooter at SMU. He came over from Duke as well. I actually think I had this weird conspiracy theory that Danny Ainge is obsessed with Duke players or players that were at some point at Duke. So I love Semi Ojeleye's potential as a 3-and-D role player. I think in this modern NBA, you could never have too many switchable, versatile wings, and Semi really fits that mold. So I'm happy that they got him where they got him in the 2nd round.
Yeah, I'm right behind you in line there. I think he's ceiling wise, he's a better Jay Crowder, like a Jay Crowder who could shoot, and he's already shown to be a fairly consistent shooter. He's like 6'7", almost 250, and he's a beast. I think he was a great pick. Yeah.
A guy who shot 40% from 3. As you guys mentioned earlier about Ainge not drafting the guys who can really shoot. They got a couple guys in that 2nd round who can shoot.
Well, you mentioned they got a couple more guys in that 2nd round, a Kareem Allen, a Jabari Bird. Do you expect either of these guys to contribute, or G League time for these as well?
No. I really don't. I just think the team, there's too much in front of them. I think they're going to be back and forth from here in Portland. So it's really to be seen whether or not they can continue to develop.
I think that was the case. I think Bird has played himself, like, word on the street is that this guy is like lights out. And we saw some of that in Summer League. But again, yeah, I mean, I think it is just too much depth, but he's going to make it tough for the coaches for sure.
Yeah, I'm right there with both you guys. I don't think either one of them get a lot of playing time to start. I mean, who knows? If an injury happens, Jabari Bird probably is going to be the first one on the call-up list.
Yep.
I mean, he's like you said, he's been lights out so far.
Well, let's move on from the draft. Let's talk trade. Obviously, the Celtics are busy on like almost every aspect of the offseason. They just happen to pick up, one of the best point guards in the NBA in a Kyrie Irving in a blockbuster trade. This happened late August. So they make the move for Kyrie. They trade away Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, the Nets 2018 pick, and a second-round pick. What were your thoughts on this? How do you think this impacts the Celtics, and how do you think Kyrie is going to fit with this team?
Really tough from an emotional standpoint. Isaiah Thomas is someone who has become revered in Boston folklore over the last couple of years, only 2.5 years here, but he really made a huge impact on the fans. And it is tough to get into the hearts of Boston fans as an athlete here. But Isaiah Thomas, just constant energy and effort every single game, his growth here and the potential that Danny Ainge saw in him. It was really tough to see him go. But I think given what his contract situation is, given where his hip is, he doesn't project to be a player who's really going to be prolific past 30 because of his height. Where he is on the defensive side of the ball, I wasn't ready to give him $35 million a year through his age 34 season. So I overall thought it was a good trade. I think Kyrie Irving is a better player. He's signed for an extra year. He's a little bit bigger. He can create a little bit more in isolation. But like I said, I don't know if it makes them immediately better this year. I think what they had built the last couple of years was pretty special, and there are just so many moving parts. But overall, after a week of letting it set in, I was in favor of the trade. I thought it was a good move by Danny Ainge in the front office.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously you hit on it. The emotional aspect was the toughest part. It's like, this guy's, I mean, he's out there in the community. He's like very well known. I mean, everyone has run into Isaiah somewhere at a bagel shop or here or there. And like a really good dude. And obviously like just electric on the court. So, everyone fell in love with him. So it was, it was really tough to see him go. But I think the thing that's interesting is I think with that move, the Celtics, it was more so immediately in the future here, kind of a lateral move. I think down the line, obviously, it makes a lot of sense. But I think, interestingly, for the Cavs, it made them better. So, by definition, put the Celtics a little bit further behind the Cavs, which obviously is what matters right now. So it was tough from that standpoint, but obviously long term, like Chin said, it makes a ton of sense.
I mean, you guys have both mentioned the Isaiah Thomas, the emotion factor is obviously what hurt. I mean, this guy played the day after his sister died. I mean, you can't like make that kind of stuff. Like that guy had so much heart. Like you guys said, he was huge in the community. He did so much for Boston in those 2 short years. But big picture, long term, you didn't want to bring out the Brink trucks to pay Isaiah Thomas. You have Kyrie Irving on the books for 2 years.
Corey, do you think that was a factor when he started talking about that, the Brinks trucks? Do you think?
I mean,
that was
I don't like
factor,
that comment. I don't like that comment personally. I don't
like
Danny
Ainge.
saying
Do you think he had his mind made up, Danny Ainge, already, or you think that was like?
I think there was no way. Yeah, I think there was no way Danny Ainge was ever going to offer him max money. Not at his height and at his age. And then I think coming off the hip injury, I think that was just the final straw. Like, I just can't give you that money. And now we know he's not even going to be back until January.
Which is the saddest part to me, that he's not going to be back till January, because he playing down the stretch through the playoffs, playing through the hip injury, it might have cost him tens of millions of dollars in the end, which could be the end result of this whole saga with Isaiah Thomas. The Celtics weren't ready to give him $30+ million a year, but I'm not sure that anyone's going to do that next year.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be obviously the big variable, what happens with him.
Well, best case scenario for him would be LeBron leaves, and then they want to keep Isaiah Thomas to stay relevant, so they give him all LeBron's money. That's probably like his best case scenario. And with Kyrie, Kyrie's 6'3", he's not as a great defender, but he's he has more height, so he's at least a scrappier defender than Isaiah. It's just
here's the biggest
pros.
thing to that, Kory. The biggest thing with Kyrie is he's not a great defender, but what teams would do against the Celtics is they would just create an isolation against Isaiah Thomas, and he had no chance. And I think even though, I think just Kyrie's size gives them more options on defense when we're talking about, pick and roll instances and isolations where, they can't key on him quite as much.
Kyrie's shown in the past, like in the finals, he's capable of defending. It's just kind of, does he want to defend? And he's at least not at a physical disadvantage. Like you guys mentioned, though, the fact that Isaiah Thomas, the hip injury and the contract was such a huge thing. But what do you think about Kyrie this year moving forward? Where do you think he'll finish this season in terms of point guard? Like last year, I don't think he was a top 5 point guard. Where do you think he finishes this year in that top 5, top 3? What type of numbers are you expecting from him?
Right. And I think there will be an adjustment period because just looking at the scheme that Cleveland runs versus the system that Brad Stevens has in place offensively, they are night and day different. And the knock on Kyrie Irving is that he's not a pure point guard. He's not a facilitator. But on the plus side of that is you have LeBron James there. The entire system has been running through LeBron James. So many, many possessions, Kyrie Irving has turned into a glorified spot-up off-ball player with LeBron kind of running the show there. Now in Boston, he's going to have to be more of a pure point guard. He's going to need to be more of a facilitator. Obviously, it helps to have Al Horford, who's one of the best passing big men, to have Gordon Hayward, who's a pretty good facilitator at the small forward position. But Kyrie's going to really have to transform his game. There's a lot more off-ball movement in Brad Stevens' system. There's a lot more dribble handoffs. They're going to try to get him in some advantageous positions. But I think it will really help him to have kind of those increased spacing, trading Tristan Thompson for Al Horford at the end of games. That's really going to open up a lot of space for him to do his razzle-dazzle isolation moves. So for me, there will be an adjustment period for Kyrie, kind of as he toggles back and forth between being the facilitator versus being that isolation scorer that makes him so special. But when it's all through, maybe not this season or by next season, I think he has not reached his ceiling yet, and there isn't a coach that's better to help him get there than Brad Stevens.
So I think that's well said. I think his adjustment period may not be as intense as some think because if this makes sense, he's going to be, I think, less aggressive offensively. Like you said, I think he wants to be a facilitator, and that's one of the big reasons. Like point guards, like any point guard you knew growing up, or any point guard. Now they're one of a kind. Like when you go to an open run or you go to a gym, everyone else could be a 2 through a 5. It could be anything. But I mean, point guards are they're a particular breed. And I think that was well said that that's what he wants to do. And I think really his success will be gauged on really the team's success for the most part. But I think he's going to be looking to take less shots. So I think the passing will come natural to him,
Is he though? Is he really going to take less shots? I mean, I know. I do believe wholeheartedly what you said, Matt, about LeBron. Obviously, had the ball in his hand a lot, so Kyrie had to play that type of shooting guard, point guard role. He really didn't have a choice, and that was kind of that little brother role that he had to play that's been mentioned several times. And yes, I remember seeing a highlight actually from the first preseason game with them moving the ball around a lot and Kyrie moving the ball around very well. So I do think he'll be a better facilitator. But I do think this is still Kyrie wanting to be the man. And I do think we're going to still see a lot of isolation basketball from Kyrie Irving.
Definitely. I mean, if there's one thing about Brad Stevens is he's not completely cemented in his system. He does a good job of gauging his players' best abilities and putting them in situations where they can maximize it. So you're not going to see Kyrie Irving completely abandon the isolation because that's what makes him so great. But I do think that there's going to be more ball movement. I think Brad Stevens is far more creative as a play caller, as a schemer, as an in-game adjuster than Tyronn Lue is, than anything else Kyrie Irving has had. And I give Kyrie a lot of credit. He was sick of being in LeBron's shadow, as anyone would be, and they've shaped their entire roster around LeBron. They've adhered to all of his demands for in-season trades, and I don't blame Kyrie Irving for thinking that he can reach another level and wanting to get there before he reaches the end of his contract at age 28.
Yeah, one of the things Kyrie has talked about, openly, is he was really into this Celtics kind of like practice schedules that Brad puts together and their training. They give a lot more time to rest than a lot of other teams. Like, after a late game, there'll be no morning kind of shoot around. There'll be more midday, so they have more time with the families in the morning. And traffic in Boston is a factor. So like, he's spoken to like a lot of these kind of real life things that was really attractive to him. When coming to Boston.
Moving on from Kyrie, we'll definitely talk about him more in a little bit. They also made another trade. They traded Avery Bradley for Marcus Morris. Morris is kind of probably one of the more underrated guys in the league. He's on a good contract. What were your thoughts on picking up him?
Yeah, I like Marcus Morris. I'll give a shout out to Avery Bradley first, then I'll get to Morris. Bradley was obviously moved so they could clear up some financial cap space to sign Gordon Hayward, get him into their cap space. So Bradley was the choice over Marcus Smart and then Jay Crowder at that time to move off of his contract. But Bradley, what they're really going to miss is his on-ball defense. Such a tenacious on-ball defender. Only 6'2", but can really guard both positions, chase guys off ball. And his offense has come so far since he was initially drafted. He was such a broken offensive player, and he's added to his game every single year. I think it's a great move for Detroit to pick up Bradley. But with Morris, he adds an extra grit factor that I think the Celtics really lacked. He's a tough player. He doesn't back down from anyone. He can do a little bit of everything, space the floor. He's good in pick and roll as a ball handler. He can play in more of a team-oriented scheme. He's a versatile defender. I do wonder if he'll have his head on straight, because that's always the issue with Morris or Markieff Morris. But I think in the new system, he'll provide a lot as that stretch four, someone who can toggle between the 3 and 4 spot, similar to the way Jay Crowder did last year.
Yeah, I mean, he's a dog, man, and I think every team needs that, and everyone needs like a little bit of crazy too. And so, he's coming off the not guilty verdict out there in Arizona, so he's on his way back for camp. But yeah, I think he's going to be a pretty good fit, and he does have a documented history of being pretty good against one LeBron James. So that could be helpful.
I mean, I'd take Avery Bradley 9 days out of 10. I wish Avery Bradley was still on this roster, especially post Isaiah Thomas trade and Jay Crowder trade. Yeah. I think Avery Bradley would have been such a nice piece alongside Hayward and Kyrie Irving, just as that 3-and-D player that he was. But obviously, like you guys mentioned, Marcus Morris is a tough guy. I mean, this is your bruiser. This is your enforcer. This is the guy who can go out there and maybe not throw an elbow on purpose, but he'll throw an elbow down low. He fits that. What Brad Stevens said, there's ball handlers, wings, and bigs, or whatever he said. This is another wing they can add. He can play the 3, the 4. It's a solid move. I just personally would have liked Avery Bradley to be on the team still.
So Kory, oh, sorry. So Kory,
go ahead.
Kory, but here's the thing. Like, we were talking about how the Celtics have been so, calculated in this rebuilding / being good at the same time. And that's, like, we all love Avery Bradley. If you love, he came out of Texas, like Matt said, 2010, I think, and was garbage. You know what I mean? He was an athletic guy, and that was it. And he's become a plus offensive player and an elite perimeter defender. And so, yeah, Detroit got a steal, but given the circumstances, I thought it was a really good take. So I like Morris here. But those are the tough decisions you have to make. If otherwise you have Avery Bradley in a contract year, then at the end of the season, what happens? Then you end up having to work around that instead of, continuing to work towards the future. So I hear your point. It was tough to let him go.
I think that was a big factor, was the expiring contract. They didn't want to pay him. He's going to get good money probably this offseason. And like you said, getting a guy like Morris, when you lose a guy like Bradley and a guy like Jay Crowder, you need that extra toughness. And he's a versatile piece that kind of fits what Brad Stevens trying to do. He's a guy he can kind of mix and match out there.
Yeah.
I think it's undisputed that Bradley is a better player than Morris at this point and more valuable for the way the NBA is going. But I thought the Celtics did well, backed into a financial corner, having to open up cap space for Gordon Hayward. Every GM in the league knew it, that they had to get rid of some contracts. So I thought they did well to get Marcus Morris back. The knock against Morris is that he doesn't rebound for his size, being 6'9", even though he's shares the same DNA as Markieff. He's not nearly as good of a rebounder. So the question for him is, now that he moves away from Andre Drummond, who's such an unbelievable rebounder, can he step up his rebounding on both the offense and defensive glass playing with Al Horford. And the Celtics were killed, obviously, in the rebounding category. So if they're going to go with Morris down the stretch in those critical minutes, they're really going to need him to contribute in that area.
Guys, so check this out. So if you take Horford and Morris's stats from last year, they are literally the worst rebounding front court duo in the history of the NBA.
Yeah.
So, that's a great point, Matt. That's all.
And they had issues rebounding last year too.
One thing that worries me too is the fact that you're good. One thing that worries me too is just Morris is it's another guy who can't really shoot, but he's never shot over 44% from his career, or he did it one time. 3-point is shaky. His true shooting percentage is shaky. That's the one thing that worries me is you're just getting another guy who, like you said, guys, he can't really rebound, and then offensively he's also one-sided.
Yeah, but he's going to be a system like intangible. Like you don't need offense from him, and we got to remember
That's true.
that
it's a fifth option.
This isn't last year's offense either. We have people that can create off the ball. Last year there was one guy who could create his own shot. Right. This year there's at least two, and then Jaylen Brown can do that as well.
And Morris is so much further down in the pecking order than he was in Detroit. I think, at the end of games there, they had Andre Drummond off the court just because of his free throw shooting. Reggie Jackson had a terrible year. So really, to me, it was Marcus Morris and Tobias Harris running the show in the critical moments. So in Boston, Morris will fit more into a role player. I don't think they're going to rely on him to create his own shot, even though he's been okay in isolation. I think he's going to become basically a glorified spot-up shooter, someone maybe they can ask to handle the ball a little bit, but with so much more talent than what the Detroit roster has, he's going to have to be able to scale it back a little bit. And that's going to be asking him a lot. Someone who has shown some stubbornness in his play, sometimes has not approached the game with the right mentality. So I am interested to see if Morris can adapt to that sort of situation.
Yeah, Matt. Yeah, well said. Two things on that. I think one, a lot of times I do think guys can be poisonous, but I do think the Celtics locker room is pretty secure along that measure. Secondarily, you made a really good point about him being kind of a spot-up shooter. If you look at his metrics, he's a really highly rated guy, in that kind of like 8 to 12 foot range. So picture Kyrie going in there, 2-3 guys on him, a little shuffle pass to Morris. He's going to hit that 80%. So, that's a good fit right there.
Moving on from trade pieces, let's talk free agent signings. We mentioned them a lot already. Gordon Hayward, the Celtics won this sweepstakes. Like Kory mentioned early on, Brad Stevens was a big reason for this. Obviously everybody going into the offseason was like, Gordon Hayward's going to sign with the Celtics. Were you guys, surprised that he did, or you knew for a fact from the start that he was going to come to Boston?
No, I didn't know for a fact just because Utah had such a great year. Utah's a great place for him, and they built him up and they developed him. And I think Quinn Snyder, the show that he's running out there, the Jazz are in a great place right now. So I was not dead set at the beginning of free agency that, we're definitely going to land Gordon Hayward. But the Brad Stevens factor does come into play. I think obviously we weren't in the room to see how they sold him, but the system that they run in Boston, maybe Hayward saw that as more advantageous than kind of the grinded out end of shot clock system that they had in Utah. Utah was last in the league in possessions per game, just such a slow, arduous kind of offense. And it's going to be completely different in Boston. And maybe that's something that Gordon Hayward was sold on.
So I think Hayward actually spoke to that point, and he said that the metrics on that are kind of off because they would get into the half court and pass it around a ton and just didn't shoot quickly in the shot clock, but it wasn't necessarily slow. But whatever, yeah, you're spot on there. But let's not kid ourselves. Like Stevens, if Stevens wasn't here, the Celtics would just be another team. He's been recruiting this guy since he was watching cartoons, basically. So, and to answer your question, no, I think Celtics fans were hopeful, but sure, by no means, because Utah is a comfortable place to be, and I think it says a lot about a guy, wanting to kind of put him. It's easy to stay in Utah. There's no expectations. No one expects you to win the West. It's like the argument I always have with my buddies. I'm like, why would you go to as a college basketball player? To me, it says a lot about your character if you go to be the 12th man on Kentucky's roster rather than the best player at Maryland or Syracuse or, Georgia or, it's two different mindsets. And I like the killer mindset of Hayward, and he's in town and he's ready to roll.
I'm proud to say that I thought all along Hayward was going to Boston. I'm actually looking at my tweets. February 22nd, I said, understand this. If Boston doesn't trade for Paul George or Jimmy Butler, they will sign Gordon Hayward, take it to the bank.
And maybe that's why they didn't.
You've got no dog in the fight, though, Kory, so it's easy. Like, if I was on the outside, I'd be like, yeah, he'll go there. But, like, it's one of those things
hey,
where...
that was... Yeah, I understand. You're right.
But yeah, no, good call. I appreciate the reference. It's always good to reference your own print.
And maybe
So
that's why they maybe that's why they balked at the price for Jimmy Butler. I actually think that they didn't even get to call on Paul George. Kevin Pritchard kind of did that super quickly with Oklahoma City, and that was right before free agency. I think they were very confident that they were going to be able to land Gordon Hayward. So to them, they didn't want to mess with their cap space by bringing Paul George or Jimmy Butler in before they had Gordon Hayward signed into their cap space. Now, look, after Gordon Hayward was signed, would they have maybe done the Paul George trade instead of the Kyrie Irving trade? Yeah, maybe, because they've been flirting with Paul George and Jimmy Butler for the past two. So it's totally feasible. But at the same time, Kory, like you said, maybe they were so confident in their ability to get Hayward that's why they passed on such a low price for George and Butler.
I don't think Pritchard ever wanted to trade George to Boston personally, but I will never know what happened with that. But moving on, that's crazy.
I think the Brad Stevens factor just can't go. Like, I think that was just for me personally. Ever since they signed Brad Stevens, I was always looking at when Hayward's a free agent, because I just always thought in my head, like, that would be such a good reunion. Boston loves their white guys. I'm not even trying. I had to say it one time. Boston loves their white guys. They're going to get Gordon Hayward. The Paul George thing, though, I actually thought there was a chance that Hayward and Paul George would be on the same team. In the middle of the season, Paul George had made a statement saying he would love to play with Gordon Hayward, that, they have a decent relationship. And we know relationships are so important in the NBA. And actually, if I recall something, I remember reading something about Paul George saying that, like, he would have agreed to sign long-term with the Celtics if they could have guaranteed them signing Gordon Hayward. But obviously they couldn't do that, so the Pacers made their own, different move.
What a terrible move that was. So to your point about the race thing, and I don't want to get too into it because there's obviously a lot of roots there, but just I think to maybe a simpler degree, everyone loves kind of like the fish out of water story, right? So, we love fat guys named Tiny. We love short guys in the NBA. We love tight ends that played basketball. We love pitchers that are 7 feet tall. Like, you like the oddities, right? So Gordon Hayward was this kid who was like not highly touted through middle school or high school. Brad Stevens kind of plucked him out, took him under his wing. They were really tight and high-level tennis player. And for him to get to this level, I think there's inherent interest in that in any market, but yeah, your point is well taken.
Well, even his transformation from, coming in the NBA, he was still scrawny in the size he is now. He put on a lot.
You look back at the video of him at like Butler. It's like he looks like like some dude at a Allman Brothers concert.
Yes, the Justin Bieber hairstyle.
Yeah, totally shag.
But moving on from Hayward, we'll probably mention him again later, too. They also picked up Aaron Baines, Shane Larkin, two other NBA veterans. Larkin was playing overseas last year. Aaron Baines, probably one of my least favorite players. What are your thoughts on these two?
I was just going to say that I love Aaron Baines, but I won't say that now. But yeah, I mean, Shane Larkin, whatever. I mean, I remember I watched him in Miami a couple times live, I think in college, and impressive, but I mean, he's a guy that's there. I don't put him personally ahead of really any of the guards. Yeah, but I love Baines. I think he's a bad dude. I like him a lot, and I think he's a smart player. But
yeah, I'll defend Aaron Baines too. I mean, I might not like him as much as Tommy Heinsohn likes him. I don't know if you guys have been following that.
he likes everybody.
That's that story. You guys can Google Tommy Heinsohn's feelings on Aaron Baines. But I think what Baines brings, just from a sheer girth, size, toughness standpoint is something that the Celtics have been lacking since they traded Kendrick Perkins to Oklahoma City. Someone who isn't afraid to hit the glass, isn't afraid to take on contact, someone who embraces physicality. Even in the first game, he got into it, into Michael Kidd-Gilchrist's face. I think Aaron Baines, he's not someone that's going to take over and be a prolific center. I think he's someone that they should be bringing off the bench personally, but he's a good screen setter. He's someone who knows what his role is going to be as someone who can just find creases in the defense for little 12, 15-foot jumpers, crash the offensive glass, the defensive glass, uses verticality at the rim. He did that a little bit in the first preseason game. So I think if you deploy Aaron Baines for 10, 12, 15 minutes a night, he can be really useful because the Celtics bench is super, super young and inexperienced. And if there's one thing that Aaron Baines knows, it's his role and where his value is in the NBA as a big man.
I mean, I like Aaron Baines. He's probably maybe the best rebounder of the team at this point in time. That's a really hot take. But he rebounds four rebounds a game in 15 minutes. He's solid. Like you said, Matt, he's very scrappy. He can do a couple things down low. He knows his role. With a team that desperately needs big men, this is a guy who can definitely fill in that slot for now.
Yeah, he fits what the Celtics need. Just don't pass him the basketball. He's not really going to do much. But talking about other guys they picked up, they had some guys they previously drafted or D-League signings. Daniel Theis. I'm going to try to pronounce this guy's name. Gershon
Yabusele.
Yabusele.
Yeah.
That definitely was a tough one right there.
Call him the dancing bear.
Yeah.
And Abdel Nadar. Any of these guys?
Abdel Nader.
Nadar. Okay.
Yeah.
Matt's got these locked up on me.
Yeah.
But do you think any of these guys are really going to stick out for them, or what do you expect from them this season?
Yeah, Theis, man, right, Matt? Theis is looking nice right now. And I think, we were talking about some of that front court depth. I mean, this guy, he's been playing professionally since I think he was 6, overseas. So, but he's got some serious miles on him, and he looked completely comfortable in a preseason game. And he's kind of like a better Matt Barnes in my book. He's big, he's strong, and I really am excited about. And I think that's one of the reasons, the Celtics were kind of able to give up on Zizic, who everyone was very high on, but didn't really impress in summer camp. And this guy's really stepped forward, and I mean, I'm excited to see what he can do.
I love Daniel Theis as well, Jesse. I thought he played very admirably in the first game. Obviously, we're kind of overreacting to what we saw in short stints, but
that's what I do. That's what
you have to do when you only have such a small sample size. But he played 5 seasons in the German league, won 3 German league championships. So he's in his mid-20s. So he's not your prototypical rookie. I think, as we've been saying, the Celtics in the front court are lacking prototypical big men, people who can really fill in at the 4 and 5 position. And he does a little bit of everything. He's a good rim runner. He can space the floor a little bit. He can run pick and roll. He can catch lobs. He played very, very well in Eurobasket. I recently wrote an article about his play in Eurobasket. And with Abdel Nader and Yabusele, I think they're going to struggle for minutes. Nader won the G League Rookie of the Year last year, playing for the Red Claws. He's a player that can get to the rim at will, but as I kind of question whether he can drive left. He's pretty much all right. And then Yabusele, such a weird guy to watch because he's like 6'8". He's got to be well over 250, but he has incredibly quick feet, incredibly good foot speed, but he is a big dude. I mean, he's
stealing, he could be Draymond Green if everything works out right.
Yeah. I mean, I won't say that. So I won't say that quickly, but that's how they sold him, that he had that kind of skill set as a 3-and-D player, someone who can defend the post, who can defend the perimeter, do a little bit of everything. And he was playing in China last year as a draft and stash. He's a player that I'm interested to see. I'm curious to see if he can play an NBA 82-game schedule while he carries the weight up over 250, up over 260. Yeah. That's something I'm interested to see, but he's not going to get more than 10 minutes a game unless there's some sort of injury in front of him.
I don't know much about Nader. Yo Gabba Gabba, whatever the hell his name is. But I really like Theis. That kid looks like he could be the real deal. Like you guys said, I looked up his Euro stats, and I mean he averaged. I don't like to see points per game. I mean really nothing, but in 19 minutes he averaged 19 points, which is always fun to see. He's a decent guy. He can bully. He's got some size to him. He can shoot the three. They definitely need, like you said, Matt, front court help, and this is the kind of guy that can just slide right in.
Matt said it really well with just the one term. He said rim runner, and I don't want to overhype him, but I think he is like a poverty-stricken man's like Anthony Davis, kind of his playing style, very long, very active, very quick, able to kind of do it all. So. Yeah.
And what they were looking for with Kelly Olynyk was, obviously his 3-point shooting. I don't know if Theis is going to be as good as Olynyk from distance. Olynyk is one of the better floor spacers from the 5 spot, but he's so much more of a fluid athlete than Olynyk. Just watching him, his ability to attack closeouts, to get to the rim, to catch lobs, that's something that you'll never see from Kelly Olynyk. That's what they want.
Who would be a less fluid athlete?
Exactly.
Question, man.
That is a good point. That is a very good point. But that's what they wanted Kelly Olynyk to be when he was.
I had love for him. I had love for him, but he just honestly, for him, it comes down. He needs to work harder on his body. That's what I think.
Well, Miami's a great place for that, just to get him in great shape.
Get the beach bod.
Yeah.
But talking about Olynyk, let's talk departures. Obviously, the Celtics had a ton of roster turnover. Avery Bradley, Isaiah Thomas, Jake Crowder, Kelly Olynyk, Tyler Zeller, Jonas Repko, Gerald Green, Amir Johnson, Jordan Mickey, James Young. Before we talk about departures, do you think this team could make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference? These, if you put these 10 on a team?
Oh, in the Eastern Conference, absolutely. Yeah, they would. I mean, they are a good enough veteran team. Those 10 to definitely be like a 6 or 7 seed. I mean,
that's a great question.
It would be tough if they don't have Isaiah until January, because I don't know where the scoring is going to come from. And maybe you just give the ball to Tyler Zeller and let him just huck up 50 shots a game. But yeah, that's an interesting question. But I do think that team could win in the East.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, honestly, I think, if IT's healthy, like you said, I think they really could. But out of those guys, obviously, we talked Avery Bradley, we talked Isaiah Thomas. Let's talk a little Jay Crowder. This is a guy that I think hasn't been talked about enough, and I think they really will miss him because he's just a nice fit in what you're trying to do. He's such a great complementary player. He'll really help the Cavs this year.
Yeah, that's one of the big thing that really scares me, because as good as the Cavs have always been, their defense was pretty suspect, especially on the perimeter, and he's just so versatile. And yeah, I think that's a big addition for the Cavs depth wise and on the defensive end.
To me, Crowder. Go ahead, Kory.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say I like Crowder's fit with Cleveland a lot. I think because they really needed like more size, especially at the wing position, and just the fact that he's a solid 3-and-D guy. He doesn't need the ball in his hand. I just think playing against a playmaker, a facilitator like LeBron James, I just think Crowder's going to have one of his better seasons.
Yeah, I actually thought it was the right time to trade Crowder. He's on such a great contract, one of the most desirable contracts in the league. Yeah. He fits the modern 3-and-D role player to a seam. Like when you look that up, I think Jay Crowder is one of the first people that really comes to mind. And they did a great job maximizing his talent coming over in Dallas. He was kind of a throw-in at that point. People didn't really think that Jay Crowder could turn into the player that he's turned into. And his versatility, kind of when they downshift to the small ball lineup, when he moved to the 4, that cannot be overstated at all. But Crowder shot something ridiculous, like 44.5% from 3 for the first 2 months of the season, and then fell off the table after that. So I wonder, and he's been more of a mid-30s shooter for his career. I wonder if he can replicate that on the offensive end. And then defensively, he is very versatile. I will say that. A versatile 3-and-D guy who can body up players in the paint and then defend the perimeter a little bit. But I thought he actually lost a step on the perimeter last season. His offense went up, but compared to 2 seasons ago, I actually thought his perimeter defense went down a little bit. Obviously, he's still in his mid-20s, signed to a great contract, and like we guys said, it's a great deal for Cleveland because every single acquisition that LeBron James has demanded has been offensively oriented. And that's part of the reason why I hated why they got Dwayne Wade. I won't get too much into that, but Crowder is someone who fits the mold on the opposite end, someone who's not going to demand a high volume of shots, someone who they can fit into that role of more of a floor spacer who can catch and shoot the ball. And they're talking about starting him now at the 4 and moving Kevin Love to the 5. So they're really valuing Jay Crowder. I think they'll miss him, but it opens up a ton of space for Jason Tatum to get more minutes, for Jaylen Brown to get more minutes at the 3, Marcus Morris. They're just so stacked at the wing position. And now, I preach you can never have too many wings, but if there is one team that had too many wings before that trade, it was the Celtics.
Yeah, I think the one thing to keep an eye on for Jay will be health. Can he play a full slate for them? So yeah, but no, I think well said. It was sad to see him go, but again, a move that probably needed to be made. But yeah, his drop off in threes was staggering because he was lights out, and then it was really a factor down the stretch.
I can't remember the last time a number 1 seed lost 10 players.
Never.
The following offseason.
Yeah,
the roster turnover has been insane.
It's crazy. And the fact is that they could end up being better this season. We don't know what's going to happen, but they have so much talent. They added, 2 all-star players in Hayward and Kyrie. But let's talk, we'll talk about starters now. Who do you think starts this team on opening night?
So besides the obvious, Kyrie at the 1, Hayward at the 3, and then Horford either at the 4 or 5. And then it's kind of a question mark, which is pretty interesting for a team that's penciled in to be a top 2 seed. To me, I would start Jaylen Brown at the 2. I think as a defensive specialist, his ceiling is really high. He offers a lot more length than Avery Bradley. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's the defender that Avery Bradley is, but if there's one thing that you can say about the Celtics backcourt is it was tiny last year. A 5'8" guy and a 6'2" guy starting in the backcourt. So Jaylen Brown gives them a lot more size. I think if you deploy him in a defensive specialist role where he takes on the best opposing backcourt player and then spots up from the corners. He was 45% shooting from the corners last season, which is really encouraging. And he won't need to rely on his offense in the starting lineup. He can rely on Kyrie and Hayward and Horford to facilitate it, and then he can just focus on his defensive role. And then to me, I would start Aaron Baines and then take him off the floor with 6 minutes in the first quarter, bring Marcus Morris in, just because I want to preserve Al Horford's minutes at the 5. He is not a pure center, and I want him to be healthy throughout the season. So I think managing his minutes at the 5 spot is important. So I would start Aaron Baines, but I would end games and play the critical minutes with Marcus Morris.
Yeah, I like what you said there. As far as Baines, I would be starting Baines in the front court as well. Obviously, the other spots are pretty obvious. We move to the shooting guard. So there's 2 schools of thought on this. You got Marcus Smart who could start, which I would be fine with, but then your bench is very young. So I think there's something attractive to kind of having Marcus Smart kind of leading a second unit, if you will, to some degree. Also, is Jaylen Brown ready to start? And I have no problem with him starting. I think he's ready to do so. So, I mean, that's the variable to me is kind of how do you want the rotations to work? And that'll be, what the first several weeks or months of the season is about.
Yeah, I mean, the Celtics are one of those teams that can throw out so many different rotations because of all this different size and youth they have. For me, I think Irving is obviously the point. Hayward obviously is there. Horford. I think Horford plays the 5. I think they go small to start. I think Morris starts. And I think, like you said, I think Jaylen Brown starts. I like the point you made, Jesse, about having some type of veteran leadership coming off the bench with all those young guys. I think, a Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown headlining the second unit is probably more ideal.
I mean, Smart's the longest tenured Celtic. Yeah. Like, come on. I mean,
that shooting guard spot is going to come down to a lot of spot-up shooting, a lot of catch and shoot, a lot of coming off of curls, a lot of what Avery Bradley did last year. And I just trust Jaylen Brown in that role more than Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart,
okay, I like that.
For all of his defensive abilities is – everyone knows that he's not a good shooter and he's lost all the weight, but I love him as a 6th man, someone who's bringing energy off the bench, someone who can run a second unit as a point guard. I love him as a facilitator, as a playmaker. I don't trust Terry Rozier running the second unit quite yet. Maybe Shane Larkin mixes in a little bit, but I think that's more of an insurance policy for them. So if they start Smart, I don't see a really good option to be the second unit floor general that the Celtics can deploy. So that's the part of the reason why I really like Marcus Smart in the second unit.
Yeah, I like that. But I'm higher on Rozier than most, I think. But yeah, I agree. I think I like Smart coming off the bench, and I think his shooting is going to be a bit surprising in a good way this year. I think he's going to be much better there. So we'll see. But yeah, it's a good point with Brown coming off the screens and stuff. He's good. He's got good feet there.
Yeah, like you guys said, I think they definitely go with Brown. Just the fact that Marcus Smart is such a good player off the bench, he can kind of change the game with that spark he brings. Sometimes it's just he does those annoying plays that kind of just get things going. He might get a charge, he might flop a little bit, but it's going to kind of get the team going and kind of change the momentum of the game. I think in terms of starting Baines or Morris, it definitely depends on Brad Stevens' thought process. If he wants to protect Al Horford, like you said, Matt, he'll go with Baines and he'll help them rebounding wise. If they want to go small and really compete from the start, they might go with Morris. So, but what do you think is their death lineup or the lineup that they'll finish with this season? You can give me either one, whatever you want.
Yeah, great transition. I think Morris is the one that switches in. It's no secret that the Celtics' best lineup last year was their 5-out lineup with Horford playing the 5, running the ball or offense through him at the top of the key. Having him set 4-4-5 screens sometimes on different types of sets. I think their death lineup has to include Marcus Morris. There will be times when you see Jason Tatum as that stretch 4 as well. I think ultimately that's something that they want to do. And then to me, it's unclear if they go Jaylen Brown or Marcus Smart. I think that's a complete toss-up because I see the value in having both of them at the end of games. I think at the beginning of the season, I would go with Smart because he has more experience. He's a better, more versatile defender right now than Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's ceiling is great as a defender, but end of games, I trust Marcus Smart more than I trust Jaylen Brown. So it's kind of interesting. I'm advocating for 2 starters, but I'm advocating for them to be off the floor at the end of games.
I'll go with my death line. My death lineup is, I just don't know if Morris is in the death lineup for me. For me, I'm looking at like Irving, Smart, Hayward, and then I think Jaylen Brown at the stretch 4, and then Horford. Because I do think I like the athleticism.
I don't hate that, Kory. I don't hate that. Yeah.
Because you get the defensive Smart, and then you get the offensive athletic ability of Tatum to run the floor. I mean, obviously Horford at the small ball 5 isn't the best thing, but it's worked in the past. And of course, you have Irving and Hayward.
And it's such a luxury, Kory, to be able to have Jaylen Brown who can play the 2 and end games at the 4. Like you said, that's a totally feasible option for them. So their wing depth and their ability to play positionless basketball is endless and deploy different lineups that you don't even know who's the 5, who's the 4, who's the 3. And Brad Stevens has come out and said, it doesn't matter. I don't think about those 5 positions anymore. And that contemporary modern thinking is something that's very refreshing as a Celtics fan.
I mean, when they play Brown, Hayward, and Morris, all those guys can switch, pretty much 2 through 4, defensively. So that's the type of stuff that I love. The only person they really have to worry about on defense is Kyrie.
And Marcus Smart can switch all the way to the 4 too. He shut down Paul Millsap in a playoff game. They've used Marcus Smart all over the place. I mean,
we'll see. I mean, he's much more dainty this year. So we'll see.
It's true. He's a lot thinner, and they're talking about being more up tempo. So we'll see. They won't have to move him to the 3 and the 4 as much because they have so much more depth. But just the only players on the roster that I think are bound to one position are Shane Larkin and Aaron Baines. I think everyone else plays at least 2 positions on this team, which is such a luxury to have,
especially with a coach like Brad Stevens.
Yeah.
So, but breakout starter, who's breaking out from the starting lineup? Who's putting up a big season?
Jaylen Brown, for me, for a lot of the reasons that I said, I think his mindset is in the right place. He played really, really well in Summer League. I think he approaches practice. He approaches getting better in the right way. Everything that you read about him, his work ethic is off the charts. So to me, Jaylen Brown is the player in kind of an uber-focused defensive role. Now, will he break out on the offensive side? I don't know about that because if he's starting, he's going to be 4th, 5th option at best in that lineup. But I think he can make enormous strides on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's the obvious pick for sure. Would be Jaylen Brown. I think again, it's going to come down. I think early on, I think we're going to see some starting from Smart. So I expect him to have a very very good season. And I mean, your question was technically which starter is going to come and break out. And I think Kyrie's assist numbers will be up. I think his scoring's down. I think I think Hayward's going to have an up scoring season. I think Jaylen Brown's going to be much better on the defensive end, and we're going to see some shooting from him. But I think Smart, kind of all around, being more in control and even more of a playmaker, I think he's going to be pretty exciting this year.
I'm going to go with Hayward as the breakout starter, only because this is probably the first time in his career he actually has an offensive player better than him alongside of him. He's never had a go-to scorer. He's always had to be the go-to scorer. And I think it just takes the load off you when you have a guy like Kyrie Irving next to you, of course, with the ball moving all around him with the Brad Stevens system. I think Hayward's set to have maybe not a giant leap in scoring, but at least in efficiency.
Yeah, I think that's a great call, Kory. Yeah.
Yeah, and there will be so much more. There will be so much more spacing for Hayward this year, being away from Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert, who are not floor spacers at all, and then trading them for Al Horford and Marcus Morris, who are floor spacers. My one concern with Hayward is if you look at his advanced statistics, he is a much, much, much better shooter off the dribble than he is catch and shoot. And in this system, there are going to be a lot of players driving and kicking the ball out for three-point shooters. And you saw that in the first game. Hayward looked a little bit uncomfortable catching the ball and spotting up versus being the primary ball handler like he was in Utah, being a high usage player, putting him in countless pick and rolls. He's still going to see a lot of that sort of stuff in Boston. But to me, the biggest adjustment for him on the offensive side of the ball is, can he catch and shoot from players who are penetrating into the paint and kicking out to him? And I'm not scared. I think he'll make that transition because he's just that special of a player offensively. But that's the one thing that I think from a schematic standpoint will be tough for him to adjust to initially.
Matt's not scared. Bringing the heat. That's a great point. Yeah. No, and you're right. He did look very average spotting up like that. So we'll see what happens with that.
Definitely some adjustments, and we know Brad Stevens will put him in a great position. You guys kind of handed me a layup right here. I'm going to go with Kyrie Irving. Obviously, when you ask from a trade from the Cavs, when you're almost guaranteed a trip to the finals, you need to step up, and I think Kyrie really wants to show people what he can do on his own. Like you guys mentioned, I think playmaking-wise, he's going to improve. Offensively, he's still, I think, going to take a lot of shots. I don't think his scoring will drop that much because the Celtics might need him at certain points to kind of just ISO up, and he's just going to be the man. So I think that kind of is going to just put some more pressure on him, but the type of pressure that he wants.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Kyrie averaged like 27 and like 7 next year. I think that's a fair thing. All right,
I would love that.
Something close to that, maybe, and maybe a little bit less, maybe 26. And
See, I think his points are lower and his assists are a little higher.
Over 7 assists would be really, really surprising to me, but he definitely has that capability. The last time we saw him, and really the only time we saw this Kyrie in a pure point guard position, was with Team USA in the Olympics, because Mike Krzyzewski ran him as kind of a pure facilitator point guard. But outside of those handful of games, we've never seen him do it on a full-time basis. So I am interested to see if he can uptick those assist numbers. That is a storyline that I think people should be following.
I think that's going to be his. Honestly, I think intrinsically that's something that's going to be important to him.
And I think having Al Horford there, like we mentioned early on the pod, he's such a smart basketball player, and he's somebody who can kind of facilitate for you a little bit. He's going to take the pressure off him. He can spread the floor. And we know with the versatility of the lineups, I think it's just going to be a really good season for Kyrie. Do you think there's a possibility he can end up in the MVP discussion this year?
Yeah, I mean, he could be up there simply because he's going to be the best player on one of the best teams in a conference. I think he's going to statistically put up the most numbers. I wouldn't put him in the top 6-7 candidates right now, but I think his ceiling is top 10. His top 10 MVP candidates to me.
Yeah, and I think the story gives it some juice too, right? Like he moves to a new market, he's on his own. So, we know how that stuff works. There's some human interest to be had there. But, yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurately said.
Kory, what about you? You think he can get an MVP discussion?
Yeah, I think Kyrie has to be in the MVP discussion only because the Eastern Conference is worse. I think there's gonna be a lot more spotlight on Eastern Conference players, especially like within those top 3 teams. I think maybe he'll be in the bottom conversation, like he'll be in like the top 10. But I mean, he's nowhere as close to winning MVP this season.
Of the players who moved, all those superstars, do you guys think that Kyrie has the most to prove to the general public out of all the superstars who have moved?
I think so. Just because he asked for a trade from Cleveland with LeBron and, obviously having a chance to go to the finals with the Cavs, leaving a situation like that, especially where, LeBron could have left Cleveland next year and that could have been his team. I think he put a little extra pressure on his stuff. So he has to prove himself.
And not just leaving, not just leaving Cleveland, but coming to a team who had, marked success last year. So you're coming to a team, you have to prove yourself. There's all these factors coming from the outside, but then all of a sudden you're on a team that was already good. So, there is a lot of pressure there for sure.
See, I'm a little biased on this because I personally think Paul George has a lot to prove, being a Pacer fan. But, I mean, there's certainly pressure, like you guys just mentioned. I mean, he's going from a team that was in the finals for 3 straight years. He won a title. He's going to a team that had developed a culture of their own. Obviously, if he goes to Boston and say they struggle out of the gate, or say they don't live up to expectations, and they're like a middle of the pack team in the East, that's all on Kyrie or Horford. They're going to blame Kyrie for the most part.
All right, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. Just because Kyrie is 25 years old, I think there is going to be an expected learning curve. I think Celtics fans owe it to this current roster and to him to give them a leeway period to sort of figure it out. And I look at what Chris Paul and Carmelo Anthony, where they are in their careers, being in their 30s, coming from where they came from. Carmelo kind of having a disastrous career in New York, only winning 1 playoff series. And then Chris Paul, considered to be the best point guard of this generation, but never been to a Western Conference Finals. I think in the immediacy, there might be more pressure on those guys because Kyrie Irving is theoretically not hit his prime yet.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, playoff-wise, they definitely need to win a chip faster. But I think out of all the guys probably traded this summer, Kyrie might be the only guy that was traded to the team, and he's expected to be the best player. All these other teams picked up superstars, but they're not necessarily going to be the number 1 option. Kyrie's going to be the number 1 option.
I think his comments also may have put an unexpected target on his back at times too. I don't think he handled all the LeBron question as best as he could. The I don't care or whatever. So I think he added a little bit on himself as well.
See, I liked his whole approach to it because, I mean,
no, I like it, Jed. Don't get me wrong, I like it, but I just think it. I think it does put a target on your back more than when you make statements like that. Yeah,
no, I hear it. As opposed to what? Like if he said something.
Well, he could have given the political answer like, "Oh, it was great to play with LeBron, and I wish him all the best, and like I just wanted a little bit of a change for me." And
he could have given that pretty cool though. He still played it pretty good, but
he didn't need to go onto like First Take and be like, "No, why should I tell LeBron about my plans? I don't owe him anything."
Yeah,
right.
But he's always had such a weird relationship with LeBron because people are like, "Oh, well, LeBron's like a father figure to you," and Kyrie's never liked the father figure, the little brother thing. Like Kyrie's obviously wanted to be, and he's such an interesting personality. He's always wanted to be his own independent kind of trailblazer.
See, I can appreciate
that's part
that,
of the reason why I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And yeah, me too. That's why I give him a lot of credit for asking for the trade at age 25 instead of age 27.
And you could, we know LeBron's like a real kind of like passive aggressive, like kind of like middle school girl kind of dude. So,
for sure.
I mean, that's, and I think it was really telling that interview that he did and called him kid.
Good point.
6 times in a minute or whatever. And
yeah, I tried to do everything for the kid. I was going to give him the keys to the car. Yeah, right. I don't believe that for a second. LeBron James is such a control freak. There was no way he was going to turn over the offense to Kyrie Irving this year.
Yeah.
But real quick, let's get your breakout bench player. No explanation necessary. Who's going to break out on the bench? Just give me a name.
Marcus Smart.
Dice.
Marcus Smart.
Yeah, Marcus Smart. I think they're going to need him to be big on the bench, especially with all the young pieces. Let's talk wins though. best case scenario for the Celtics in terms of wins and in terms of playoffs? Where do they go? Do they win a championship? Do they make it to the finals? Best case scenario.
Best case scenario, they win the Eastern Conference, their first seed going into the playoffs. I think their ceiling is probably in the low 60s. I don't expect it to be there. And they get past the Cavs. And best case scenario, the Warriors have a couple injuries and they win the NBA Finals. But if the Warriors are healthy, there's no way they're going to make it past the Warriors this year.
Yeah, best case, I would, obviously it would be 82, but yeah, I'd say probably low 60s. I'd say the floor is probably, if things go drastically wrong, upper 40s or so. But yeah, I think we'll probably, again, 2 seed this year, end up, playing the Cavs in the finals. And, I'd like to say, best case, the Celtics win. They see they meet up with, the Portland Trailblazers in the finals, and they win. But no, I think currently constituted, man. I saw that picture from practice the other day of the Cavs, and you just look at the lineup, and health is going to be a big thing for them, but I don't see the Celtics taking them this year. We'll see. I think injuries obviously will be the big variable, and Isaiah Thomas in particular.
Yeah, I think best case scenario for the Celtics is 60 wins. I think that's them coming out of the gate, just soaring, which I'm not positive they will do with all the, obviously, they lost 10 players. The roster turnover is incredible. So the chemistry will be probably a start. Like you guys mentioned with, Hayward not necessarily feeling the catch and shoot just yet. But if they hit the gate running or come out of the gate running, 60 wins doesn't seem, unfathomable, especially in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think the fact they play in the East, that, best case scenario 60 is really possible. I think finals appearance is definitely a possibility if something with the Cavs don't go right. You mentioned Isaiah Thomas not being healthy, or just, somebody going down that really hurts them, or maybe the Celtics just really start to click. Who do you think the Celtics could beat in the finals, not being the Warriors from the West? Could they beat a Houston? Could they beat San Antonio? Could they beat an OKC?
I think they could beat any of those other teams. I don't trust Houston, or at least I didn't last year. I thought Houston was a terrible playoff team. I don't think just launching threes, the first look that you get, shooting in the first 8 seconds of the shot clock, I don't think that's a sustainable kind of scheme to run in the playoffs. I think if they, for some ridiculous reason, make it to the finals and don't play Golden State, then they definitely have a chance to beat anyone else in the West.
So to me, the Spurs are always terrifying just because of the obvious. Popovich, Kawhi, if he's healthy. The Rockets, I don't have a lot of love for the Rockets. To me, it's simple with James Harden. He's not a playoff player, because he doesn't get all those calls he gets in the regular season. A lot of his game is about positioning and momentum going to the bucket. And, he gets frustrated. I think he completely takes him out of his game. I honestly think he's, basically useless in the playoffs. So I write the Rockets off. Who's the other team I missed?
OKC.
Oh, OKC. That'll be interesting to see. To me, Russell Westbrook is one of those guys that is just awe-inspiring. So we'll see what that fit is like. I think right now the Celtics take them, though.
Man, the Houston Rockets slander, I like it.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it.
You guys make fair points. Houston Rockets, if they don't hit 25 threes in a game, what are they? It's not like they're anything special without the three ball. And you make a great point, Jesse, about James Harden. He's kind of like DeRozan, but they rely so much into the free throw line.
Exactly.
They're
just like the Raptors, in the postseason. They're the Bengals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what's going to happen because their style of play, like James Harden doesn't get those ticky-tack fouls every time down the court in the playoffs, and that's his game. You know what I mean? And,
I agree.
and we saw that last season. And so the regular season's all fine and good. And as we talk about the Celtics, they're the ultimate, they're the team that plays hard every night. They're the team that when other teams on a back-to-back would kind of, might take it easy. Brad Stevens ain't having that. He coaches like he's in college still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think that's a factor.
Yeah. I think the Celtics definitely, if they match up with the Rockets or OKC, they have a very good chance. The Spurs, like you mentioned too, Jesse, they're scary. You can't ever rule out Popovich. Who knows what would have happened if Kawhi didn't get hurt last year against the Warriors. Not that they would have won, but who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, you don't want to face Popovich in the finals. I mean, like, I think I'm a little bit higher in Houston than you guys. I think Chris Paul's really going to help and make things a lot easier for a lot of things. And I think some of the role players they got. I'll save that for the Houston pod though. Worst case scenario for the Celtics, everything goes bad. What do you think's the worst thing that can happen? Just give me wins and playoff.
I think they could be less than 50 wins, high 40s if the adjustment period takes forever, and then out in the second round losing to a team like Washington that already has their core set.
Yeah, I would say upper 40s. If Kyrie Irving accidentally walks off the edge of the earth.
It's flat. It's flat.
Yeah. So I was actually really glad to hear lately he kind of recanted on that, said he was trolling. So hopefully some of the bright scientists in the area got in his ear and let him know what was up. But so I'd say upper 40s, and they meet a tough kind of upstart young team in the East who who maybe had an injury during the season, gets that player back, and they can get beat in the first round.
Ooh.
Suppose John Wall or Bradley Beal, go out for an extended period of time. The Wizards fall to a 7 seed.
That's true. I wasn't thinking that they'd play the Wizards in the first round.
Right, but we're talking worst case scenario, right? So I mean, I think that's or the Bucks or somebody like that. I think that's feasible.
Yeah, I think the 4-5 matchup in the East, because I think the Bucks are right around that mark. Whoever has to be the 4 seed and play like the Bucks or something, you're gonna have a tough series because the Bucks look dangerous. I think worst case scenario is right around 50 wins. I don't think they stumble too far. Just the talent in the East is so bad. I mean, you got to play so many crappy teams for the majority of the season. There's a lot of chemistry building games in the East.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. High 40s, maybe 50. I think, first round exit is possible, like you mentioned. They do get a tough matchup in the first round, but they lose in 7 and have to be a team like Washington or Milwaukee that has, a player like a John Wall or a Giannis Antetokounmpo, somebody who can really like change a series. But realistically, what's going to happen next year for Boston? How many games they win? Where do they end up in the playoffs?
I have them at 53. I think there is going to be a large adjustment period. I don't think they're going to be a better regular season team than they were last year. But this team is building for the future. They're building for the playoffs. They will figure it out. But I will not be surprised if by the All-Star break, they're in 4th place, something like that. But I have them in the low 50s. I think 53 is the number for me.
I got them at 56. Slowly getting better throughout the year. I think the adjustment period won't be quite as long. 2 seed, they'll meet the Cavs and lose in 7.
Yeah, I have them also, Jesse, winning 56 games, Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not ready to say if they beat the Cavs or not. I got to see how the Cavs look with all those pieces. I mean, obviously on paper, I think the Cavs do win in 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think you guys are pretty much spot on. I'm agreeing with Matt. I think more around like that 52 win thing, because I think, chemistry can be an issue early on and just kind of getting everything to sync right. But come playoff time, they'll get to the Eastern Conference Finals and they'll probably go 6 or 7 with the Cavs. If you had to put a percentage on it, what do you think is the percentage they could beat the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals this year?
If Isaiah Thomas is the Isaiah Thomas that we've grown to know, I would put it probably around, I don't want to say 50% because that's a cop out. I'll give it 60% to the Celtics and 40% to the Cavs. I think the Celtics are gonna be a better playoff team than they are a regular season team by then. I think they're gonna be a machine and really figure things out. I trust Brad Stevens to put them in the right positions and after a couple months really figure it out.
All things being equal, I'm going 47%.
What about you, Kory?
I'll go 35%.
All right, one more question. Chances that Kyrie Irving hits a game winner over LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals to send the Celtics to the NBA Finals.
Oh, that would be amazing.
100%.
What would happen?
Well, it's either that or he dunks on LeBron. I'll put that.
Oh God. Well, remember who made that shot to win their title? I mean,
it's true. Hey, Kyrie, they had the GM survey today, and Kyrie came in third amongst GM votes for a player you would want to take the end of game shot. So,
Yeah, I
something
mean,
to be said about
Only
his
behind
clutch
Curry and
factor.
Durant.
It was Durant and Curry
Yeah,
ahead of
only
him.
behind Curry and Durant. Yeah.
Hey, he's still third,
Exactly.
though.
That's
Still third.
something noted.
Isaiah's
I'm
got to
saying-
got to be
I'm
up
saying
there.
that, like
yeah, he's definitely earned his respect in the clutch, especially just that shot in the finals alone. But moving on from there, let's talk the truth. Today, my emoji for the Celtics is a rainbow because, they didn't get their pot of gold yet, but it's still coming at the end of the day. Like we mentioned, they got all these young assets. They have these young players in their prime. A championship is definitely going to be in the future, and it's at the end of that rainbow.
I like that. I got two. I have the juggler emoji for Brad Stevens because there are just so many moving parts on this team. I think he has the biggest adjustment period, with all respect to Billy Donovan, because the Celtics just have so many priorities to develop young players, to work in their young players, their rookies, to acquire two new superstars. So I think Brad Stevens is the toughest road ahead of him for any coach. And then for the team, the hourglass emoji, because I'm ready to pump the brakes on them. I think there's a lot of hype around the Celtics. So I think it's the beginning of the hourglass where the sand is just starting to pour down. And but at the same time, that sand is going to run out at some point. Now, this isn't just a bunch of upstart players like the Celtics have been since 2012, where you're like, oh, well, I'll just take what I can get from them. And if they play well, then I'll be happy. There are high-level expectations now. I think it's fair for Celtics fans to not be green teamers and just be happy with whatever Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge do. If a championship doesn't come in the next couple years, or at least a championship appearance, then I think it's a huge disappointment for them. So it's the beginning of the hourglass. The sand is just starting, but that sand will run out at some point.
Man, that's deep. That's good. I'm gonna go. I'll go a little lighter with mine. Mine's gonna be a taco, because today is National Taco Day.
I like it.
I just kind of feel like, tacos and burritos, like NBA teams, they're pretty much, relatively speaking, very good among foods, right? But in order to have the best taco or burrito, you need to mix all these ingredients into the perfect blend inside your soft or hard tortilla. And I think Brad Stevens is one of the best chefs out there in the NBA. And so
I got to be honest,
taco.
This was one of the better emoji uses we've heard over these previews. That was really good, Jesse.
Well, I'm glad I could inspire you, Corey. I actually didn't have one going into this conversation, so I had to.
I like it. On the fly, that is fantastic. I have two. I have my easy one, which is the 4-leaf clover, because they've gotten incredible lucky to this point. I think between the draft picks from the Nets, obviously, and heisting them, getting the Sixers draft pick, or other Lakers draft pick, I should say. Whatever other draft picks they have the Kings. They have so many; it's ridiculous at this point. Being able to trade and get Kyrie Irving, signing Gordon Hayward. The luck of the Irish seems to be around the Celtics team at this point in time. After losing 10 players on the roster, they still have a Eastern Conference Finals roster on paper. And then my other one is similar to your hourglass, Matt. It's the moon, because this is either going to be a dark period coming forward if they don't, progress right, or it's going to be a shining full moon where this team is going to run the East for years to come.
Good stuff on the emoji, guys. Let's talk League Pass, though. Where do you rank the Celtics 1 through 10 League Pass wise?
I'll try to be objective. I have them at an 8.5 because they just have so many interesting storylines. How do they incorporate the superstars? How do they develop the young players? Is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, how quickly do they emerge, and can they reach their ceilings? Not this year, but how quickly will they develop? How does Marcus Smart play in a contract year? So I think there are just so many interesting factors going on with the Celtics right now. I think they're a great League Pass watch.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 9. I think, there's a few things that draw me into a basketball game. It's the top end talent, the team itself, how the team plays, are the main thing in there, and the competition of the game. And the Celtics have a knack, for better or worse, or always have, in being in close competitive games. So we'll see what that is. But, like Matt said, a lot of good storylines. And so I think, they're going to be a great watch all season. And, it's always fun to tune in to watch young players develop. And the Celtics have, several very good young players.
I'm going with my highest league pass rating so far in the previous series. I'm going with a 9.
Damn, I should have said 9.
I think you look good, Matt, right now. You look good, though.
See, I like the 8.5, but I didn't want to take it, so I went 9.
Yeah, so far the only people I've given a 10 to is the Pacers. Completely biased.
What?
That's his team. That's his team.
Oh my God.
I should have said 12.
Yeah, exactly, right? I'm going with a 9. I think, I'm a big Gordon Hayward fan. I've loved Kyrie playing alongside LeBron. Now he gets to do his own thing. Last year, you guys would like to hear this. Besides the Pacers, I probably watched the Boston Celtics second most on League Pass. I probably watched right around 60 games last year. This is one of my favorite teams to watch, especially because of Isaiah Thomas. But they've done a lot of right things. I've always liked Stevens. This team just has a lot of appeal to me.
Yeah, a lot of great storylines. I mean, for me, it's going to be a 0 out of 10 though, because I don't want to watch Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum play.
I get that. As a Nets fan, I get that.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I'll give them an 8 out of 10 with my skewed scale. So that's, as high as it's going to get. And I think that, with Kyrie, like you mentioned, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, and then all the young guys, I kind of want to see how this bench develops. And I want to see Marcus Smart if he takes another step. So I think Celtics, one of the best teams to watch all year.
I want to just add 2 more quick things. If you like modern contemporary basketball with a lot of ball movement, a lot of player movement, there is not a better team other than maybe the Warriors to watch than the way Brad Stevens runs his team. So if that's what you're into, the direction that the NBA is going, I think the Celtics are a great choice. And from a league pass perspective, can you get a more unpredictable color commentator than Tommy Heinsohn, who has made it twice into this podcast? So, I mean, his level of unpredictability is also a factor that plays into the league pass rating.
Gonna miss him saying the little guy.
Yeah, just him yelling at refs as they run up and down the floor.
Yes,
like,
my God,
forgetting that he's on TV and just screaming at the refs as they run past him. It's a huge factor. I mean, I'm a little bit of a homer when I say that, but
Tommy is one shockingly big dude. When you see him in a game, he is one massive dude. Yeah. But yeah, he's funny, man. He's funny.
Yeah, you definitely know when you're listening to a Celtics broadcast. But you would watch.
He represents a homer at best.
Yeah.
It's going to get to the point where it's like trying to take the keys away from your grandfather. And it's just be like, Tommy, we got to. What are you talking about?
He knows he can get away with saying anything because he has an incredible amount of job security. He's been around the team as a player, a coach, or an announcer since 1960 something. So he's been around for so long.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You would watch the Celtics over what TV show that you like?
Everything. I legitimately the world could be invaded by aliens and I would not change it to news and I would still watch the Celtics.
Yeah, as far as TV shows, I mean, I don't know if a Seventh Heaven marathon was on, it would be tough, but
so, I like it.
Pretty much everything I'd go. I'm going Celtics, obviously.
I'm all right. So I'm going with one of my favorite shows of all times. I'm going with Entourage. I would watch the Celtics over Entourage. One of my favorite HBO shows.
Me too.
That's meaningful. There you go.
Love Entourage.
I'm going to go with another show that I like as well, and I'm going to go with Weeds.
Love Weeds too.
So, I mean, the Celtics are getting some good respect. Like we said, they're going to be one of the best teams to watch all season long. Thank you guys for hopping on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. Let us know how we did. Rate us, review us, and have a great night.